Sheikh Bradford is renowned in the world of Islamic finance. He was the vice president and senior Sharia consultant at Al Rajah Bank, the largest Islamic bank capital markets. Additionally, he's certified Sharia advisor and auditor, CSAA, accredited by the Accounting and Auditing Organization of Islamic Financial Institutions, IOFA. Sheikh Bradford has a PhD from the International Islamic University of Malaysia with a focus on financial injustice. So please help me welcome Sheikh Bradford to the podium.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We have like way too many titles in the community now. Everyone is Sheikh, Dr., Mr., Ustad, Mulana. I mean, first name basis is fine. Joe is fine, alhamdulillah. So what I want to talk to you today about, I'm sure is well below the level of most of you, and really it's just a reminder for us about the possibility of reconnecting Islamic finance with the real economy. Our brother Dr. Ala, who had spoken about the structures that they were using in Canada, I think he and the presenters before him made a lot of good points about the constraints that regulation, markets, the needs of investors make. The base ruling for all transactions is that they are permitted and allowed. Al-aslu fil mu'amalat, al-hil, wal-ibaha. And the reason why I'm starting with this is that it is very important to remember that we should never get off on the foot of speaking from the context of something being impermissible, then we're trying to make it allowed. Everything is allowed, and then if it falls into the realm of impermissibility or questionability, then that's when we make that proclamation. This is something that here in the United States, in most common law jurisdictions around the world, is very easy to do. In other jurisdictions that are much more restrictive, based on Justinian or civil law, that can be much more difficult to do. I was recently in Uzbekistan, in Tashkent, for a conference, and they've been working for 5-6 years on the draft of an Islamic finance law, which still has not been passed. So anything which is happening is kind of happening happenstance. And to give you an idea of the level of detail that they wanted, they were like, we want every single step of every single transaction that you're ever going to do in Islamic finance to be written down and no one to do anything outside of that. Those types of restrictions can really kill innovation. They can really stop people from trying to come up with structures where you're meeting the needs of a religious institution like a waqf and the needs of investors who are saying things like, I'm tired of donating my money, I want to make some money and get my money back, you can use my money for the time. Similarly, we'll find that these types of concerns are much easier to take into consideration when we as an ethical principle start from the idea that everything is allowed. Now, that does not mean that we do not need to fulfill the contract conditions for the validity of a contract, but everything beyond that is something which is allowed. So why do contracts, why do projects, why does financing go bad? Essentially, it goes back to one of 4 things. Either we are trading in something where the object is forbidden. We're involving ourselves in a revenue stream of something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has expressly forbidden, for whatever reasons that might be, but we know that dealing in that thing is not allowed. The other 2 major points that come up always are riba and gharar. Riba, which many times will translate as interest, and gharar, which many times will translate as uncertainty, but I think actually it's more of a knowledge gap in the contract components, are the two major issues that will come up in any deal. Now, the complication that we get at this point is how do we quantify something like uncertainty or a gap in the knowledge in the contract? The problem with riba is not that we are delving into express forms of riba. You know, most of us, I go over with my students, they say, well, the hadith of riba says gold for gold, silver for silver, wheat for wheat, barley for barley, salt for salt, date for dates, like for like, hand to hand. Whoever adds or seeks an addition has committed riba. What does that even mean? I haven't traded salt for salt in ever. Why would anybody sell gold for gold? Why would anybody do dates for dates? And it's important to remember that that was speaking to the economy that was there present at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the essential lesson there is that two can never be equal to one. You cannot have a value in a contract that does not have a legitimate counter value. Now that then brings up the point of whether we have additional entities in a structure, why are they there, products, services, and whether those are actually there because they're meaningful to the structure, or are they there because they're simply trying to act as a pass-through to allow money now for more money later. As Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he was asked about a man who went and sold a silk handkerchief and 1 silver coin for 2 silver coins. He said, dirhamun bidirhamaini baynahuma harira. 1 silver coin for 2 silver coins with a handkerchief stuck in between. Because the handkerchief was not there for a legitimate purpose in the contract. Now, any condition going back to these other 3 issues is also forbidden. So we can't have a contract where we're going to stipulate a usurious or an interest-based transaction. We can't have a contract where we stipulate that something is going to remain unknown, and that unknown is going to affect the ability of the counterparty to actually know the value that they are going to take out of the contract. Now, in my research, what I found is that in reality, when you look to what the scholars have said about selling something which is forbidden, the issue of riba, the issue of gharar, that all of it goes back to the wisdom of prohibiting dhulm, prohibiting injustice or oppression. Now, dhulm usually is very succinctly translated as وَضَعُ الشَّيْء فِي غَيْرِ مَحَلِّهِ, placing something where it doesn't belong. My research has found that when we look through all of the different issues that are brought up in the tomes of Islamic law, from the chapter of tahara, purification, all the way to the end of the books of fiqh, like the book of Iqrar, you will find that there are all issues where scholars have connected the dealings that people deal in with the concept of injustice and oppression, of taking something where you're not supposed to, or when you're not supposed to take it, placing something where you're not supposed to place it, in violating an established right or an established natural order, or something that is belonging to someone else. Now, where does this fit in with these? Well, inherently, there are 3 types of dhulm. There are 3 types of injustice. A person does injustice to himself by doing those things that Allah has forbidden. He does injustice to others by entering into deals with them that wrong them in some way. He does injustice to Allah's right to be worshipped alone by violating the prohibitions and by not obeying His commands. So in reality, when we talk about the object being forbidden, that's a pure violation of our obligation to be just or to avoid injustice in our relationship with our Lord. When we talk about riba and gharar, then this is a violation of not only our relationship with God, but our relationship with our fellow man as well. So all of it fits into the ideas that lead to injustice, the process or resulting state of moving away from a proper, original, or natural order, thereby misplacing a right, object, or concept. So the idea of injustice is not something which just happens and then we say it is. It can be something which is static. It can be something which is volitional, that we choose to do, or it can be something which is systemic, that arises out of the social order. And so working to create a fair economy means that we as individuals, as volitional actors, should be people that are trying to combat oppression at every level. Stopping systemic oppression of those who have been prevented from financial services, stopping individual oppression in dealing in those things which are forbidden, whether they're contractual or related to what we are buying and selling, and then generally standing for the truth and correcting those things when they happen. That is also part of the injustices when we are silent about injustice. Now, when these things are avoided, then what we have in the end is the real economy. Real economic activity is left. So some modern researchers, when they were talking about the wisdom behind the prohibition of interest, it was because the person who takes an interest rate from a debtor is essentially receiving a return above and beyond the real economy. There is no counter value that matches the amount that they are getting. And you might say to yourself, but they're getting the use of the money. They would have the money anyway. If the money was given to them, they would have the money anyway. But let me ask you from a business perspective. If you are trying to invest in a business, do you want that business bleeding capital, or do you want that business to have as much capital as possible so that it can weather the storms and be able to stave off any risks that face it? Obviously, as an investor, you would want that company to be well capitalized. You would not want to find out that somebody in the corporate structure has been stealing money or siphoning money. Why then would we then allow for a static or dynamic amount of that money to be taken away from the capital structure and given to an outside party while we're bearing all of the risk and they're taking the return for nothing except the fact that they gave that money? There's a theological dimension there too, and that is the person that is looking for an interest rate essentially is placing themselves in the place of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Allah is the only one who can promise a return on top of the return. مَنْ يُقْرِضُ اللَّهَ قَرْضًا حَسَنًا فَيُضَاعِفَهُ لَهُ أَضْعَافًا كَثِيرًا. Who is it will give a goodly loan to God so that He may multiply it for him, multiples upon multiples. So when we say, I'll give you the money, but I'm not going to do any work, I'm not going to take any risk, you're just going to pay me back and you're going to pay me more, you're essentially saying to yourself, I'm the one who deserves this, you don't. I'm the one who should bear no risk, you're the one who should bear all of that risk. So when we avoid these things, the real economy or the real economic activity is left. Okay? Now, remember, real economic activity in Islam, in Islamic finance, represents a fundamental philosophy that finance should serve the real economy rather than exist as an independent sphere. The principle ensures that financial transactions contribute to productive economic output, employment generation, and genuine wealth creation rather than merely monetary circulation. So in an age of efficiency, where somebody would say, well, isn't it easier for me just to loan and take that loan at interest? And that's easier for me and easier for the business owner. The question has to become is that does that actually cause real economic output? Is there real wealth generation? Is there any input of not just money, but smart money, where someone is giving something and getting something in return. So when we require asset backing, when we prohibit pure speculation, and when we promote risk sharing, Islamic finance aims to create a more stable, equitable, and productive economic system where financial activities are intrinsically linked to real economic value creation. And I want to say one thing about risk sharing, and that is, it is a misnomer that everything in Islamic finance needs to be based on the sharing of risk. But there must be an assumption of risk. So when you and I do a business deal, and I sell you something and you buy something from me, I'm assuming that I'm getting value from you and you're getting value from me, and then we're transferring that to each other, right? But if he doesn't like it, whatever he's bought from me later on, well, if the sale is final, the sale is final. So sometimes we talk about Islamic finance in terms of only sharing risks, not taking into consideration that there are many other things that relate to risk, such as the assumption of risk, and then that assumption being final simply because the contract is final. Okay, let's take 3 quick examples of real financial structures. These are real structures that have been used internationally, nationally, and locally, where because of the freedom of contract in the United States, because of the ability to not be inhibited by regulators, and to embed in these contracts a sense of justice and a sense of equitable sharing of the wealth creation, people have been able to see these products thrive. So the first internationally is the cash-linked Waqf deposit that is prevalent in Indonesia. So an MOU is signed, customer makes a deposit, that deposit is then invested on behalf of the customer, a yield is paid, that yield is distributed to the Waqf as a way of generating income for it, and then later on the cash is returned. So essentially this person is making a Waqf of the returns, not a Waqf of the capital. And there are many papers that have been written about this topic. I encourage everyone to go. You can find them on SSRN or other academic websites. But this has been particularly successful in meeting the needs of Waqf projects, but also not having to sacrifice the cash long term for those people who might not need it now, but might need it later. The second is a musharaka-based home purchase product here in the United States. Now, there are many ways that this is done, both by private companies, by companies that work with GSEs, and by private equity firms. But looking at a one-on-one relationship with the person who wants to buy a home, the customer identifies the residence, the company then co-owns the home, the customer rents, all co-owned costs are shared, and all appreciation is shared as well. There's no amort, there's no pay down schedule, there's no mandatory purchase, but there is a mandatory lockup period of a short period of time to ensure that the person who is co-owning is able actually to see appreciation along with you. This has shown considerable success in a number of states here in the United States. And then lastly, our local example is a Sadaqah-linked small and medium-sized business support framework here in Texas. So a number of charitable individuals said, listen, we're willing to give money to help support small and medium-sized businesses. But what we want to see is an encouragement not to just give them sadaqah, but we want to be able to give the money to those businesses. Let them see if they can really do what they say they can do. If they make money, then at that time we'll do one of two things. We'll split the profit with them and continue the business. The profit's coming back to the masjid that is organizing this for us. Or if we see that this person would do better with the capital on his own, we give the capital to them as sadaqah at that time. So now we've managed the risk of somebody simply taking sadaqah and spending it on their needs, and instead we've created a wealth generating project for that person and for the community. Either it goes for the community as a whole or for that person. This has had a nominal success before COVID. Unfortunately, during COVID, everything kind of shut down along with, everything else pretty much. Except here in Texas, we declared freedom from COVID, so we didn't really suffer as long as other people. So what are the lessons learned? If you want to be involved in the real economy, you need to identify a real need. This should not just be financialization of relationships. You should ensure a path to implement it without prohibitions. And then you should ensure that your documents and the execution reflect the values that you're claiming are in there. And someone might say, that seems so simple, Joe. What are you talking about? You would be surprised how many people come to me with startup ideas and they say, I have a great idea. I'm going to give payday loans. And I'm not going to take interest. I'm going to take a percentage from the fee. So, okay, well so the fundamentals have to be there. So money is made from actual ongoing management and activity, not simply arbitrage opportunities, not things that have been prohibited. And so with that, I'd like everyone to thank NACIF, Dr. Ma and Dr. Kabir, all of you who have listened diligently to what I've said. I hope that it was of any benefit to you. And I'm looking forward to benefiting from all of you in your presentations as well. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.